Veronica, thank you so much for being happy to chat to us. Can't wait to hear more about your journey and where you are at the moment. It would be great to start sort of from the beginning in terms of when did you first realize that you were experiencing training stress or something like REDs or REDS?
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Man, I think I knew that well, I guess we'll go a bit further. Developed an eating disorder in 2014. And at that point, I was playing collegiate soccer or football. And I fell pretty deeply into an orthorexia, overtraining, underfueling um, habits, I guess. And that was exasperated by not playing as much. And that was because I was performing poorly, but I was in such a stubborn headspace that I didn't believe that it was because of my performance. It was because my coach just didn't like me. And so because I wasn't playing so much, I was running X amount of miles outside of practices and outside of games. And it was very excessive. And from then, I continued to do a bit of the overtraining and the underfueling and under recovering. And after college, just continued to run a lot and do a lot of gym work with no real goals. And I fell into the cycling community in Seattle, Washington. And within that community, I sort of found a bit more balance. And I think because I had sort of found my community, the eating disorder was a bit silenced. It was definitely still there, but the severity of it was not as drastic as it had been previously. But then when I got into the professional cycling, a lot of those habits were triggered, and that prompted not just underfueling, but then went into bulimia for some time. And at the end of 2023, I'd broken my collarbone in a crash in July of 2023. And then after that, I had recovered and then was going to get back onto the bike, got back on the bike, then suffered a very severe case of heat stroke, which, yes, was prompted by the extreme heat that was in Girona, Spain at the time, but also due to the habits that I was having, the bulimic habits. I was hyperkalemic, so my potassium levels were extreme, and I was near renal failure. And I think that was definitely rock bottom for me. I 100% could have died. And I think I had the full realization that something needed to change. That said, fueling got a bit better, the habits stopped. But I was still overtraining at times. And in the off season that year, I was running with my brother and in 45 minutes had severe pain in my heel. And I just thought I had pulled something and then continued to try and walk on it. And I couldn't walk anywhere without crying, and finally went to go get scans and found out that I'd fractured my heel. And that was another realization moment of, okay, that's not normal. And had my bone density scanned, and my bone density was I was in osteopenia, closer to osteoporosis, which is irreversible. And so I think that was fully the moment I decided, okay, yeah, I need to focus on improving my health because, yeah, my performance has sort of plateaued at that point. Yeah, I was more focused on the longevity of my life post cycling, and yeah, I decided to really focus on that.
How was that conversation with your family and your team and your fellow cyclists?
Man, I mean, my family and friends, aside from cycling, were incredibly supportive. They've known me as a non-cyclist for most of my life. I got into cycling quite late, and so they just wanted me to be happy and healthy. And similar to them, my team was very supportive at the time, and they wanted me to be healthy and happier. I was definitely in a very low mental state in the past, and they saw that that was a big issue. And I think they did still see a lot of potential in me. And in 2024, I had started the recovery journey, but was really struggling with the contradictory lifestyle of trying to recover while also trying to perform. And they supported me in stepping away, act with the goal of coming back in 2025. And they were incredibly supportive of that and helpful in a lot of ways. And then 2025, I was mentally in a much better place and also physically, but not at the point of performing as well as I'd like to have been performing, but I was still very much in reds at the point. My hormone levels have been very poor, and with poor hormone levels, my performance wasn't going to be as good as it could have been. And so I was still living that very contradictory lifestyle. And yeah, just trying to perform while trying to recover, but trying to recover while trying to perform. And those are you can't succeed in either way at the same time. So yeah, I was pretty burnt out at the end of 2025. And my blood tests confirmed when I had thought that they would have improved. Unfortunately, they had not. And I work very closely with Renee McGregor, who's just such an incredible human, but also incredible advocate and fighter for Reds research and healing. But I had a pretty blunt conversation with her, and this was 3 or 4 days before our team camp. And, I was pretty devastated by what my hormone levels looked like. And I said, okay, what are my options? And she said, well, either you can get back on hormone replacement therapy, just as you had been, just for bone protection, and you will probably just feel the same way that you felt this whole last year. And you can just push the full recovery later, or it'll just take significantly more time. And then I said, or what? What's the other option? And she said, well, then you can take minimum 6 months and just fully focus on recovering. Said, okay, I think that's definitely the way I need to go, because I don't want to keep living this contradictory lifestyle, and I don't want to keep prolonging the recovery period. And so, uh, yeah, I just decided to step away, and I knew that the team would be supportive of me stepping away, but not in the same way that they'd supported me in the past with being under contract still, at least. And so, yeah, I think it was also better for me to fully step away and have just the ease of mind, or the peace of mind, to just not be focused on coming back at in a certain time frame. I can just fully focus on recovering at this point and not have this just voice in my head saying that I need to get back at a certain point in the year. So hopefully my brain can relax a little bit and just recognize that it's in a safe space and can get to the point that it needs to.
How is your brain currently? Are you still hearing that voice or have things calmed down a little bit?
It's still quite active. It's active in a lot of different ways. I was talking to somebody recently about my mental health and whatnot in this journey. I mean, in the past, it used to be full of food noise and just, what am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? What am I allowed to eat? How much can I have? All of these ridiculous questions that I really didn't want to have take up my brain space, but really was. And now I feel that is much quieter than it was in the past, which is really nice. And I feel more like myself prior to having an eating disorder, which is really nice. But the voice is still there, and at this point, I'm quite good at distinguishing between what is my irrational thought and what is my rational thought. And some days I'm better at listening to the rational side than other days, but it's primarily listening to the rational side now.
And are you doing any sport at the moment?
I've been doing a good amount of lifting at this point, which has been really awesome. And I've been working with Renee around that as well, just for bone health, getting into the gym. And also, what is the term? I'm going to totally butcher this, but she said restoring body composition is what I'm working on, which is a very nice way of saying putting on some weight that I definitely needed. And I've not felt this strong in a very, very long time. So that's a really fun side effect of getting in the gym and focusing on that.
Yeah, that's lovely to hear. And when you talk about I guess, this recovery journey with Rini, is there a timeline or is it very much take each day, each week, each month as it comes?
Yeah, I think there is sort of a timeline of, this is going to take time. Let's look at this in 6 months, but take it day by day. I've had, expectations of timeline in the past. And she always prefaces it with this, it could happen in this amount of time, but that also is very dependent on this, this, and this. And in the past, I've had timelines and those things in the middle didn't necessarily happen. And so, of course, it was going to be a prolonged timeline. So I think this timeline is a little bit better because I'm able to control the day to day a bit more. But yeah, obviously the recovery journey is quite individualized. And I was in such a deficit for over a decade, and that's going to take some time to come back from. And it doesn't help that I'm 31. I think I was talking to somebody recently just about how much I wish information was more available when I was younger, and especially falling into these habits. I don't know if it would have necessarily changed how I developed the eating disorder or if I would have thought more about it. I was very stubborn in it. But I think knowing that your bone health is most significant and your bones grow and yeah, they're just mostly impacted in your 20s. I don't know if that would have necessarily changed much, but I think at least having had that knowledge may have been a bit more beneficial.
When were you formally diagnosed with REDs?
I think that was in the end of 2023 after I'd fractured my heel.
How did it make you feel to hear those?
Mm, I wasn't surprised. I knew I had a problem for a very long time. And even when I had decided to focus on recovering in 2024, I really don't think I understood or appreciated the time it would take. I'm a pretty impatient person in general, and especially when it comes to myself. And this is probably the one thing in my life that I have really had to be extremely patient with because there is no specific timeline. And I can do everything right, but I that might not get me any closer to the recovery. So yeah, I think it was hard to hear, but it was surprising.
How has the transition been from going from an athlete lifestyle to then going into full recovery mode?
Oh, man, it's been, yeah, I think the first couple weeks, it was just, first week, it was really hard. And then it was problem solving mode. I need to move out of my apartment, doing all the logistical things, figuring out what I'm going to do with this time because I didn't want to just not do anything and just sit in my brain all day. And now I think it's really hitting me how hard the transition has been, being around teammates and friends more constantly and having, yeah, just being able to have fun conversations at dinner time or talk about the race in the bus or, yeah, just the camaraderie of being a teammate. And I've been in a team for as long as I can remember, and this has been, oh my God, I might cry. This has been the longest time that I've been sort of without being on a team in a very long time, and that's definitely been such a piece of my identity is being a teammate and an athlete. But I think being a teammate is so huge, and yeah, there's a lot that comes with being a teammate, and a lot of that is missed at the moment. So, I think that's been the hardest part so far. Yeah, and the loneliness that does come with stepping away. And I know there's so many athletes in the world, even if they haven't been through REDS, that step away from it and retire, and that it's such a huge transition in life because it is such a part of your identity, and you have those. You just are a part of a team, and that sort of becomes your family for even a short amount of time. But you become so close with these people, and um, yeah, stepping away so quickly, I don't think I fully appreciated it until maybe now. Yeah.
What do you see as the steps to help you with this identity transition? How do you see that progressing, that journey?
I have definitely been trying to do a bit more work around what also identifies me, what other things about me identify me. And I am still definitely working on that. I primarily identified as an athlete, and think that was to my detriment at times, because I have had this idea of what an athlete should look like and what an athlete does and what sort of diet an athlete should have, end quote. And now that I'm away from it, I'm no longer, quote, an athlete, and I'm trying to identify myself more as a daughter, a sister, a friend, currently a student. Um, Personality traits that I have and that I enjoy. And yeah, it's definitely hard, but even though I'm not practicing as an athlete at the moment, it's still such a huge part of who I am and why I am the way that I am today. And so I think another part of this journey is, yeah, appreciating that and also using the tools I've gained from being an athlete in daily life. And yeah, I can't be more thankful than I am now for my whole life being an athlete. And we'll see what the future holds for that piece of me, at least.
And when you look back to when you started, those, even the running to the cycling to now, how does it make you feel knowing that you've got to this point where you're now putting yourself first?
Uh, yeah, I have moments where I'm proud of myself for taking that step, but I still hold a lot of shame for it. I've been in sort of that mental space where I just needed to constantly push myself, and um, that pushing through the pain or like being miserable is normal. Yeah, I think I still have quite a bit of that going on in my brain, but I have tried to recognize that it took a lot for me to step away, and that being in a sport requires a lot of sacrifice, but also taking a step away took a lot of sacrifice as well, and that I should view it as strength, to, yeah, take the time. I know my future self will thank me. I hope. Um, yeah, I definitely would like to be able to function as a 50, 60, 70-year-old woman.
What advice would you give to a cyclist or a runner or any athlete who is maybe listening to this and thinking, do I need to get help?
I mean, if you're even thinking that you need help, I think it's important to reach out to somebody that you trust, primarily an expert in the field. Project REDs is great for that. The resources available are incredible, and people should take advantage of those resources. And even if, yeah, I think if you're thinking about something being an issue, then it's better to talk about it and determine whether it is or not. It's also a really slippery slope. Something can start off as, I mean, for me, things started off as, quote, clean eating, and it turned into something so much more severe. And I think that happens with a lot of people. It's just an obsessive personality, maybe. Social media right now is ridiculous, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so I think it's really important to get information from experts and be really critical of what information you're being fed, and really, yeah, there might be people that are out there that spew a lot of information that isn't necessarily well researched or thought through. So yeah, it's really important to use your brain and, yeah, find an expert that you trust, an expert in the field of food and nutrition and dietetics and whatnot, and sports nutrition. Yeah. And also that it's really important to just focus on yourself. That sounds really selfish, but if something doesn't work for you, then don't keep trying to push it. Tried to push myself into a body that wasn't right for me and was really not sustainable and very unhealthy. And though it may have been the body I thought was what was right, it definitely was not. And yeah, it's really important to find what works for you as an individual.
Interesting that you pick up on the social media point. Have you changed who you follow or your social media algorithm since going into this recovery journey?
Definitely, definitely. I went through and unfollowed a lot of individuals that happen to not be experts in the field. They're very interesting to listen to, but I didn't want to just be constantly fed with um, that noise, I guess. And it's easier, even if I'm even if I can see it and think critically of it, it's easier for me not to see it at the moment. And yeah, I've also at the moment tricked my algorithm to only be puppies and dogs. So that's also been really helpful. But yeah, I will say, in the light of everything also happening in the US right now, I've been pretty aware of all of that. And yeah, that's a bit of a side note. But with regard to nutrition, I've definitely unfollowed and removed myself from a lot of potentially triggering information that's out there, and also potentially individuals that are pretty likely to be manipulating the images that they have posted. I think it's really easy to get pulled into what people look like on Instagram specifically. And yeah, we don't know what they're doing and if it's healthy or if it's real. So yeah, I think and ultimately just tried to remove myself from social media apart from the dog videos.
I love that your algorithm is now dogs and puppies. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I just need to have a puppy. It's
Yeah.
really the reality.
When you look at the world of professional cycling, what would you like to change within it in terms of the culture of body image or nutrition and performance?
Oof. I think there's a lot that needs to change. It's a sport that's very influenced by its history, and there are a lot of people in it still who have been in it for a long time, and change is not, it just doesn't exist. If there's some sort of improvement in the 1%, um, and people are willing to make that sort of adjustment, and like with aerodynamics and with performance in that way. And we've also seen the increase in carbohydrate intake on the bike, which is great. But when it comes to bodies and, yeah, I guess the longevity of athletes, I think I know there's so much more that can be improved on. And I do still believe that there's a culture and a pretty significant idea that specifically women aren't going to be performing at their best if they still have their period. And I think that's pretty absurd. We're in 2026 now, and the evidence has shown that obviously a period is necessary. um, and although there are times, that we may be peaking for an event and we'll miss a cycle, though it's not great, it might happen, but it shouldn't be okay to miss so many cycles. And I'm an example of having a missed period for a significantly long amount of time. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And so I think it's really important that we're focusing so much on just the 1% advantages that we can have. But if we're not focused on just the individual and their health in the long term and the sustainability of the athletes, then we're just going to burn through athletes. So, yeah.
And were periods and menstrual cycles a big conversation at team dinners and things like that? Did you know who had one and who didn't?
No, no, not at all. And I think I was a bit more hyper aware of things like that, given what I was going through. And I would sometimes ask individuals if they had theirs or not, which is they could answer if they wanted to or not. And I would preface it that way as well. But yeah, I think it was a pretty not talked about subject. And I think it was still ingrained in our heads that if we had a period, that we weren't working hard enough, and that it was still praised if you didn't have your period. I think that was just sort of an unspoken topic and not rule, but idea.
And when you think about the current cohort of cyclists, we've had, for example, lots of comments on women cyclists' body images, especially very recently. How can we, as a community, as a society, help change that rhetoric and that narrative?
Yeah, that is a very good question. um, it's tough because in cycling, watts per kilogram is significant, particularly going uphill. And we celebrate those that are the winners. I think, one, we need to do a better job of celebrating the people and the teammates that do their work at the beginning of a race. And I think also we need to be more transparent with the why and the what people are doing to get into the shape that they're in. And also the support that they might have around them in order to get to that state. I think a lot of people see what someone else is doing and try to replicate it without the experts around them. And that's when you can get into a really bad place. There are so many resources that go into an individual getting to peak performance. When someone tries to do that on their own, it's really not possible. And there's so much information out there. Unless you have the experts around you, you're not going to be able to really pick out the information and the resources that are actually helpful in a sustainable way. I also don't think we really talk about weight periodization that much in cycling. It's not necessarily healthy, but it's much more sustainable in the sport than trying to sustain, for example, the same weight the entire season. That just doesn't work. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot that needs to change. And I think we need to, as a culture, celebrate. Well, I think as a culture, we just need to not focus on people's bodies. I think we just focus on what people are capable of doing and not equate what they're capable of doing to what they look like, full stop. But that's such a culture shift that's a very ideal scenario.
Yeah. And when you look now at the next, say, 2 months, because we're hoping to check back in with you and see how your recovery is going, what are your priorities for the next 2 months?
I'm getting some blood testing done mid-February, so hoping that there are some improvements there. And yeah, I guess I'm not sure what will happen at that point. I might be able, if they have improved, I'm just going to continue doing what I've been doing, and that's just getting in the gym to lift and doing a lot less load in general. And then if it's not as good as I hope it is, I think, yeah, I'm not really sure what that will look like, but I am probably going to go in expecting it not to have improved, just to not be too disappointed if they are. But on the other hand, I should probably be a bit more positive. So we'll see. But yeah, at the moment, just trying to take it day by day for sure and work on focusing on those identities a bit more and looking at what I can do at the moment, and really enjoying that.
We are all rooting for you.
Thank you.
And wishing you all the best. Veronica, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you.